Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another exciting episode of The Inside Factor, where we bring you unfiltered and uncensored news. Today I'm joined with a very special guest, Professor Tumi Senokoane of the University of South Africa. Prof, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and afternoon.
Look, let's start getting into it. We want to find out more about your activism growing up. What inspired you to be the person you are today?
Look, I think I've been motivated by, my father, his participation in politics. But also above that, I think I gained more when I was organizing community events. But eventually, the church then gave me the platform.
Because I remember the last time I saw you were in Boksburg at the launch of the South African Federation of Trade Unions. Yes. Now walk me through that journey. What do you think of the trade union?
The trade unions is a very powerful tool in as far as making sure that it's a structure that fights for the exploited, the abused, victimized in the working space. And I came to love the labor space by accident when myself was faced with possible disciplinary action for writing an academic paper. Then when there was an attempt to deal with my disciplinary proceedings, then the union that I'm leading currently, APSA, came into my rescue, supported my academic freedom. And from that day one, then I never looked back.
Now, you've mentioned how you went through a disciplinary process. And I want to find out the systematic approach with regards to South Africa. Many of the working class, who some do not belong to any unions. Do you often feel that there's collaborated efforts to silence them in some way or another, because the leadership of corporate South Africa know that they don't belong to any organization?
Yes, it's actually very dangerous not to belong to any union, because you know that union has got mass power and can bargain with anyone, can fight with anyone as a legal entity, eventually as a legal persona. But the advantage is that then it stands on your behalf as a group. But if you want to fight as an individual, the risk is that you will be processed as an individual. No one will fight for you. You are weak actually as an individual. But if you are a unit working with others, standing with others, it protects you from any possible harm. I'm not saying that you are immune as a member of the union, but the chances are that the political power of the union and its financial muscle can assist you to fight your battles.
Now, what can you say to especially a lot of the workers who, when they see certain things that are happening in their workplace with regards to racism, with how one of their own gets treated, some of them do not want to come out and raise such issues because they've got a family to take care of. Do you think we've lost that sense of collective unity amongst the working class?
Yes, we have, but remember how business operate, or structures, even in the departments of government, they operate by instilling fear. So the fear that they instill is simple. It reminds you that the salary that you have, you still have to pay your debts on monthly basis, your car, bonds, and so on and so forth, your children's schools. So what the system does is that it reminds you that once you lose that income, the possibilities that you'll be moved to the streets, your children might not go to the schools that you wish them to attend to. Therefore, that becomes a problem in your life, in making it your problem that you should not participate in raising your voice against your employer.
Okay, now you've raised something very important here, and my mind is just boggling now. Do you think that it's because essentially we've lost our black consciousness? That now business and the system can now operate? Because I'm trying to understand, if someone is black conscious and reflects that mental attitude, you would then say, look, I'd rather sacrifice this, but this is the collective agenda that we're going to push as the workers.
Yes, correct. We have lost our black consciousness. We are a human being left vulnerable. We are a society that does no longer look after one another. So that's the biggest fundamental problem that we are facing as a society. We have adopted an individualistic culture where we only look for ourselves and do not care what happened to your neighbor.
Look, During December last year, and I want to quote this, you wrote something very interesting. A black reading of the parable of the talents. Black believers tend to read and translate and interpret the Bible with regards to the white eye. Walk us through that.
Look, reading any text, it requires certain skills, and some of the skills we've inherited from colonial past and apartheid past, where certain documents were interpreted and translated through the Western and white eye. We were made to look into certain things from a particular point of view, even when it is against us. By writing that article as an example, I wanted to show how workers are exploited, and some of them in the process celebrate the exploitation that they find themselves being imposed in them. And it is very important that as blacks, when we read the Bible, we must be able to reflect whether that particular biblical text oppressed the black being or not. And when we sense that there is an oppression against our culture, against our reality, being it political or economic, we should be able to raise that and object to that.
Look, I now want to find out something very critical here. You've mentioned that certain texts in the Bible might not necessarily speak to the black masses. Do you think that it has to do with our African spirituality and how it's been demonized and looked down upon? That we now tend to look at the West and say this seems something that we can follow instead of our own African spirituality?
Yes, the unfortunate part is that because of our historical reality, we've abandoned some of our ways of living, and that involves black spirituality. But you must remember that black spirituality has never been disassociated from life in general. Life in Africa is always holistic. You don't separate the spirit from politics, politics from economics, and society itself. They are always intertwined. They operate in the same space. That's why if you want to take one example to say, even when there is a political victory or military victory by an African, there will always be a piecing of the ancestors. There will be a drinking of beer. And all those elements, the killing of any man, all those elements reflect the spiritual, political, economic ways and of the society of a black nation. So we need to understand that there's no separation. They are always in a holistic view.
Now, you've mentioned the drinking of beer and the rituals that we do as African people. Now, I've had many people on social media who are now living in what we call white areas, who come out and says, whenever we slaughter something or have been taken to the SPCA, it's regarded as barbaric. Do you think that our own system and that our own black government perpetuates this anti-black mentality?
I think Thabo Mbeki made it very simple to say that we are two nations in one country. And it's still happening even today. If you buy a house in the township, you will know the rules are different. If you buy a house, for example, in a very expensive suburb, you will know that there are certain estate rules. And amongst those certain rules, they prohibit certain black cultural elements that you might not be able to perform them within that particular estate. One might ask to say, but why then do you buy in that estate? My argument will be that one should be able to buy property anywhere. This is our country. So one should be able to buy property from anywhere at any given point of time, irrespective of the location. But then you will know that our government have given estates certain privileges, such as more or less bylaws, to determine what do they want in their estates. And at some times, in most cases, it excludes the cultural rights of African child.
Okay, Prof, you've been very critical about the South African Communist Party, and many people have named it the South African Capitalist Party. What are your thoughts regarding Blade Nzimande?
Look, the reality is that the South African Communist Party, it should play the critical role as a vanguard of the workers. That cannot be taken away. But what has happened now is that the Communist Party, through its deployment strategy, has now become more or less government. And as a result, some of the deployees of the South African Communist Party have, in a way, compromised the ideals of the South African Communist Party, what it should be standing for, or what it should be viewed as. And as a result, the General Secretary of the South African Communist Party has been found flip-flopping on certain issues that, to a certain extent, some of them compromises the image of the South African Communist Party. But I can tell you that they have been impressed to a certain extent by their deputy, the deputy of the party, in how he has been articulating certain stands. Whether that translates into practicality, it's a different matter. But I can tell you that I've been impressed by him and hope that the South African Communist Party will wake up and become what it should be as a political party.
Now, as someone who works very closely with students, I want to take you back to an issue during Fees Must Fall. Students are protesting outside Parliament. Bladin Zamanda, as the Minister of Higher Education, starts laughing at the students. Wow, how did that make you feel as a professor?
Look, it's unfortunate that happened, and it shouldn't have happened, because one will argue that, what South African Communist Party should be standing for, should be sympathizing with those who are oppressed and exploited, and those excluded by the system. And it's unfortunate that they were found wanting in that particular critical struggle of free education or Fees Must Fall campaign. They should have been one of those organizations that played critical role in supporting the students. Unfortunately, that did not happen, and as a result, put a lot of questions into our mind.
Now, I want to pick your brain on the politics of South Africa today. You can see that the dynamics are changing with regards to the administration that we currently have and certain forces that are pulling, whether to the left or to the right. What do you think is happening politically in our current situation?
Look, the reality of the matter is that we must look back into what happened in Nasrec. Naturally, there has been in recent history a split after every conference of the ANC from Polokwane Mangaung. But what we have seen recently, that did not happen after Nasrec. And I think the other faction, the NDZ faction, if one had to use that, decided to remain inside and try to play politics from inside. Unfortunately, that did not work or is not working. The reality is that we are at a ticking time bomb, where there might be another split from the ANC. That is my view. And the way things are happening, I think sooner rather than later we might experience that.
Do you think the ANC will survive after another split?
The reality is that if the split happens as I anticipate, it will go below 50%. And as a result, ANC will only survive through coalition with other political parties. And that will be more or less the decline of the ANC, ultimately its death, because the ANC will no longer be having the privilege of dominating and dictating political space.
Now, do you think the ANC is still relevant with regards to the politics of South Africa?
Look, ANC is one of those older political parties. Its historical policies remain relevant. But what we've seen is that there's been an attempt to drive the ANC to new policies, which at certain stage contradicts the founding documents or founding policies of the ANC. And as a result, the ANC loses its own identity and origin. And because of that, we might see ANC exploding because of self-betrayal from within.
People have come out very openly, and they've made their views about this current administration, about how certain SOOs are now, the contracts are now being given to white-owned companies. Do you think that Nasrec played a crucial role with regards to the current politics that we face in this country, with the times to deployment and the contracts and the tenders that are awarded to people?
Look, I think we must give Cyril credit, but also people who, if one had to do who placed him, because it was they started as early as 70s. Certain white families, conglomerates sat down, made a decision on who is going to become their mole, if one had to use that word or concept. And Cyril came out as per the anticipation, as per the original plan. It had failed, backfired on certain years, but currently it worked. And he is through and through responding to the expectation of those people who brought him, who put him where he is. And it shouldn't become a shock or surprise to us that now whites are benefiting. He's, after all, a beneficiary of white establishment. So we should expect that it will become business as usual, in as far as giving business to white companies, white individuals, because, by the way, we are speaking about people who made him, we are speaking about his friends in the main.
Do you think that Ramaphosa will survive in the ANC?
My guess is that based on the recent history, none of the ANC presidents have survived the second term. You would argue that it is his first term. Yes, it's correct, but remember that he was acting on another term. So indirectly, there is a second term of some sort. And he might survive this one. I don't see him surviving another one. In fact, if anything happens based on the Zondo Commission, we might see ANC collapsing under him. And by collapse, then he might not make it as a president in the next coming elections.
Now, I'm happy you touched on the State Culture Commission. What are your thoughts on that commission? Because people have said, look, we can see there's a direct approach and there's a direct way of things that is being done. Others are being treated differently to others. Certain witnesses can just come to the commission and not give any evidence to the Deputy Chief Justice. What do you think is happening currently there?
Look, the problem that one always had was the composition of the commission itself, from the leading evidence leader, the advocate Pistorius himself. There was an issue that he has a relationship with the Pravin cabal. It is documented, well documented. If you check the structures that they used to belong to, more or less the same structures, early 70s. And it's not a new relationship. And you check even the secretariat of the commission itself. You must check, what is, no one has asked a critical question. What is the relationship between the spokesperson of the commission and the secretary of the commission? There is a denominational relationship, and people do not ask that question. And if you take those along, you see that everyone in that space have got some historical relationship that they have, and therefore create a subjective imbalance for those who will be appearing in the Zondo Commission.
Now, you mentioned a very key name, Pravin. I want to talk about Pravin because his name keeps on popping up every time we have interviews. What do you think is happening? Some people have even called him the president of the country.
No, the man is smart. We must not take that away from him. He knows how to play politics, and he's well established. He belongs to the cabal that is very strong, and they managed to play it right in as far as with the captain of the industry. So anyone taking him head on, you are not only fighting him, you are fighting the captain of the industry. He has a very strong, solid relationship with the president. And yes, it becomes one of those battles that when you enter into them, there is a chance that you might be cleaned out of the way.
Now, you mentioned something very important here. The role of media is to hold leaders accountable. What happens when the media becomes too powerful, biased, and indifferent? Walk me through that statement.
Look, my view is that media must remain powerful always. But what we cannot allow is only to have one type of media. The you need to have a space where there is a contestation of ideas within media. I don't mind it being powerful, very powerful, as long as we do not find a situation where there is only one voice or only one particular media is open space by government itself. Media must be independent, but from different poles, not only one side. Therefore, in its powerfulness, the media therefore will be able to weigh the balance, and that's what should be happening instead of now trying to suffocate media houses or spaces which have a different opinion.
Do you think inherently media houses are racist in the manner in which they portray black people and black leaders, for example?
Media, indeed there are elements of racism within media because the platforms dictate what should be said, what should be the form and content, and that by itself limit what media should be saying. In as far as who becomes sponsors of media, people who are putting advertisements in media, more or less they dictate what should be the content. Otherwise, they will be threatened with withdrawals of marketing and so on and so forth, sponsorship. But what I'm saying is that in as much as that is the reality, that does not take the responsibility for media to try, at least 80%, to try to be objective.
How do you think black people can go about having their own black media houses? Because now we've seen the government won't give advertising to black media houses because they are pushing a certain agenda. Corporate South Africa's agenda is very clear. But one thing they want to find out, South Africa is a country with 80% of black people. Therefore, we should make it affordable and we should make it clear that the kind of approach we want to take. Do you think South Africans are ready and to say they're conscious enough to want a black-owned media house? We should be very direct with the kind of agenda it takes.
First and foremost, I believe that media should be able to fund itself. That's the first fundamental one, but we know the limitations. Secondary to that, therefore, the state should be able to fund through certain agencies, media, irrespective that that particular media exposes the state or attacks the state. It is the responsibility of the state to fund such, because then media becomes the conscience of the nation. We will never all see things the same way. We will never agree the same way on how we view things, but it is very important that the state itself should be able to fund media independently so, in making sure that media conscientize the society and becomes the watchdog of the society itself.
Now, you've mentioned something with regards to conscientization. Do you think that academics, especially professors like yourself, have a duty to play with regards to conscientizing society? Because one sees that there's a gap between society and academia.
Yes, academics always should be playing that role. But the unfortunate part is that as academics, scholars and researchers, we do that. We write a lot on issues, but I think it's because we write whatever we write, but it's limited to books and journals, write articles through academic journals. And not everyone reads academic journals. Instead, what we should be doing now is to use media, print media and other forms of media to share the ideas that we've been researching. Otherwise, then they become the library material locked into shelves. But if we use, for example, print media, newspapers, social media and others to share the ideas, they are able to be heard and be read by a vast majority of our people. So I think that's where we are lagging as academics. We are doing a lot, but it is not exposed.
Now, you've mentioned something very important, to write with regards to mass media. Now, in an interview with my co-host, Judge Hope, I mentioned something very critical. He says that with regards to legal judgments, the language which is used does not in any way resonate with the ordinary person because it does not understand that language that is being used, because you have not simplified that judgment so that the ordinary person who has not have a higher education degree to understand that language. Do you think that as academics now and as writers who are going into that space of mass media to write for people, to use a language which is which they can understand.
No, that's true. Any document and every document must be simple to the audience. And I think that in academic circle, sometimes you use certain language that excludes people. But you must understand you do that because you want to meet the standards that are set within your peers, and you don't want to appear smoker. But at the same time, falling into the trap of excluding those who might not understand the language that you are using. And we need to have that balance. That's why I said perhaps therefore we need newspaper, social media in simplifying those particular ideas.
Now, I want to touch on higher education and decolonization. It's an interesting conversation that keeps popping up. Do you think that it's about time that the professors like yourself stand up and fight for decolonization, especially of the curriculum?
Issue of decolonization of the curriculum is not necessarily a new concept. Perhaps it has been used by different names, labeled by different names. Others will talk of Africanization, others will talk about black studies or blackness. More or less the end product is the same. But there's been a new movement now of decolonialization, which we must appreciate as it adds to what has already been happening. Whether it comes from the South, it's fine. What is important is that we should be able to embark on a process where we try, all of us, to withdraw certain colonial ways, ideologies, ideas, forms, in making sure that our African ways, our black ways becomes dominant in the discourse itself.
Now, with regards to having our black way within our curriculum, I want to touch on the judiciary, because many have said it's about time we Africanize the law. What do you think is the problem with our judiciary?
The fundamental obvious reason is that our law is Roman Dutch law. That's where the principle starts, and that's where the problem starts. Until we as a country or even a continent sit down, start from zero with our new or our African laws in making sure that we use our original laws to be able to determine what should be happening in the court as rules and so on and so forth. As long as we are not ready to do that, we'll always find ourselves locked into the base or fundamental base or foundation of the Roman Dutch laws, because that is what has been provided to us. In fact, instead of amending laws, we should have repealed all the laws and start from zero. One will say, but then we'll leave chaos. Not necessarily. You can do it, proportionally and get the results at the end of the day. But what we've been seeing is that the unwillingness to change. Even worse, even in our curriculum, we want to move from those premises of saying, look, there's a African law, there's this. If we want to speak of law, it must just be law, but the content must be African, natural. Why do we need to justify that it's African law? While law should be law in Africa, shouldn't it be justified? Why aren't we talking of European law, yet we want to speak of African law? Law must be law. It must be African law by virtue of being in Africa and not justify or qualify.
Do you think that the judiciary is deliberately being used to target certain individuals? Now, for example, the public protector, there was a personal cost order that was given against it. Do you think that our judiciary is being used to fight whatever battles, be it political or whatever battle that you might think?
I've never really believed that the judiciary is independent. For a simple reason, if you put an individual or a person is not an innocent creature. A human being is born out of a particular family, a particular society, goes to a particular church, belongs to a particular nation. And there are biasness already that one is born into. As a Xhosa, as a Msotho, as a Zulu, you are born with certain biasness. You will never ever be free from those biasness. And I do not want to believe that people are liberated completely from such biasness. What then we see happening is that people want to deny that they are biased, yet they are biased. Yes, there are certain laws that gives framework on how we should view certain things, how we should operate, but we can never divorce from the reality that we are all biased. And even the court rulings themselves, they are biased and based on your political views, religious view and societal views, economic views. And as a result, you'll always be biased.
Now, there was a recent incident where a certain judge was now influenced by the media to handle a particular judgment. Now, I want you to walk us, we've talked about the judiciary, we've talked about the media. Now, the power with media with regards to making the judgment sway in a particular direction.
Not only media does that, by the way, business does that also, can persuade the direction of the judiciary. And not only even business alone, even politicians, even bureaucrats. So there is always influence into media, not into judiciary. And in who is appointed, you know the case of Judge Klope. What happened when he was supposed to be appointed? There was a lot of noise. Eventually was never appointed. So those are the realities that we live within. And it is equally not by mistake that the president is given certain authority to appoint certain people after a particular period of time. And that it is subjective to a point that the president decides who is fit at that particular moment to serve a particular agenda.
You recently wrote an interesting piece in the independent media regarding the State Security Agency, which was causing, it's like, if I can term it, this pity around. Can you walk me through the decision of the State Capture Commission to now allow, whether it's state secrets or corruption, as some people have said it, to be heard for everybody to see?
Look, I think what people missed out of this is that we must make a distinction between corruption and state secrets. My view is that where there is corruption, people must be prosecuted and must face consequences. But there's a difference between general corruption and corruption made within state security agency. The problem is that once you speak the issues of state security agency in the open, by virtue of speaking of certain operation, you naturally make them public knowledge. And from where I'm sitting personally, as a South African citizen, I wish that if and when that happens, that there was corruption, abuse of state resources, there must be a special tribunal that must deal with that privately. And people will be prosecuted, but privately. If they go to jail, they would have gone to jail, but been prosecuted privately without hanging the laundry of the country to everyone. Because we know that the secrets of the state must remain secret so that our opponents that we might have war with them tomorrow must not know our weaknesses.
Now, people have said that this is a deliberate attack to kill our state security agency. Do you think that there's a deliberate attack to essentially make South Africa prone to all sorts of internal forces who would want to destabilize our country?
No, it's given. We know that in most of the cases, people are funded to destabilize their countries, and Africa is not exempted from that. That's why there is unrest all over Africa, because other countries in Africa have allowed meddling into their state security issues and secrecy and privacy. So it's very important that irrespective what happened or what happens, that those things must be closed into a private tribunal and people should be prosecuted privately.
Do you think that this move ultimately undermined the office of the Inspector General of Intelligence?
Yes, it did, because what we've seen is that there was a substitution by default of the Public Service Act itself. And what should the Director General should be doing. Therefore, I think what should have happened at Zondo Commission was that there should have been a referral of that matter to the relevant Director General to handle the matter and report back to Zondo, and it becomes an issue of that will be reported to the executive of the country.
Look, Professor Senokoane, in closing, what is your dream for South Africa?
Look, from where I'm sitting, I want to see a South Africa where black people will be successful, will be conscientized, will be liberated, especially economically, where classism will be defeated, and all of us will live well under good economic environment. And for an example, where all our kids will be able to attend the same schools. If one had to argue to say maybe we nationalize our schools, healthcare system should be able to accommodate all of us instead of seeing others accepted to private hospitals, others to public hospitals. And, more or less we need to see an equal society. I think that's what I wish to see one day, if it will ever happen.
Now, I was about to close the interview. You mentioned a very important part here, the nationalization of schools. You've seen that we've got a one higher education kind of process, but when you go down, you have private schools, you have government schools, and the quality of those two, it's very clear that this side is for white people, this side is for black South Africans. Do you think that it's about time that we have one curriculum for all children in basic education?
Look, first, I'm not even sure that higher education itself is the same. I don't agree, but let's go to, I think, what you are raising. At basic education, the reality is that I'll make an example. My children, because they are in private school, they've been attending school since the 11th of January. Schools were closed initially, initially they were closed, but they were given activities to perform at home. Others went online. Because of simple realities, their parents have got access to resources. They can buy data, they've got gadgets, technological gadgets. But the children of the poor had no same privilege. They are sitting at home. Even if we had to, give them activities at home, others are raised by their grandparents who might not be able to assist them at home. That is the reality of our country. And for some reason, we'll have to come with a solution to that so that all of us study in the same environments, get the same privileges, because we cannot want to punish the children of the poor for the sins of apartheid and colonialism.
Prof, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, my brother.
South Africans, that was yet another exciting episode of The Inside Factor, where we bring you unfiltered and uncensored news. Follow us on Instagram on The Inside Factor, on Twitter on The Inside Factor as well. You can catch me on Twitter on Mudibe Mudiba, as well as my co-host Tabo Makwakwa. Until next time, goodbye.